Keep it brief. So Kym Winter-Dewhirst is the Chief Executive of the Department of the Premier of Cabinet in January 2000, and he joined in January 2015. I met Kym early on in his appointment, and he and I just talked about new ways of working. And I said, right, okay, Kym, you're up here and you're going to tell us about your vision about new ways of working in DPC and the public sector. So please welcome Kym.
Good morning, everyone. It's really interesting hearing Anne talk about flexibility. I think I'll sort of depart from the script to some extent. I usually don't like working to scripts, but I guess it's the word flexibility that comes out for me and what that means to different people in different places. I'll give you an example of flexibility as I experienced it last year before I came to South Australia to take this role on. I was working in a mining company, and I'd been there for 10 years, doing a lot of things in different parts of the world, which was always good fun. The organisation had a big disused mining tenement in the northeast of South Africa, near the border with Zimbabwe. And we got reports that a lot of illegal settlement was taking place. People were building shanties as they were crossing the border and leaving Zimbabwe. And I was asked if I could go over and have a look and see if I could sort something out. And I said, sure, knew nothing about this, I'll go have a look. So I've gone over, I've got the local guy on the ground, we've got into the four-wheel drive, we've driven for an hour over this rough terrain, and it's a mining, underground mine that had closed 30 years ago. And so it still has a certain level of maintenance that has to be undertaken. Anyway, we drove to the rise of a hill, and he paused and he looked down, and more or less as far as the eye could see were a traditional South African shanty town with thousands upon thousands of illegal settlers sitting on top of the underground lease. And I thought, well, this will be interesting. And the guy I was with, he said, well, that's different. And I said, what's different? He said, a fortnight ago, that wasn't here. So it was happening at a rapid rate. So 5 million illegal settlers had crossed the border, 5 million. So you knew you had a problem. Now, inside the company I work for, the rules and the policies on these things were very strict. There were just certain ways you're going to do things, and that's it. You can't deviate from it. It's been thought out. It's all about risk management. It's about legal liabilities, all this sort of stuff. Anyway, so the guy drove me to a place, and we started getting on the ground and talking with people about why they're there and what they're doing. And they showed us a big hole in the ground where the mine had been undermined by people breaking in through the sealed air vents, going down and digging out small amounts of coal that they could put into a wheelbarrow, march 3 kilometres to a nearby town and sell. And that was their income. And the only problem was it undermines the workings, and in a recent case, an entire house had just fallen through. And, this is going down 50 metres. Fortunately, no one was in the house at the time, so there was no injuries or deaths. So I said to them, how many of these holes have opened up around the place? And they said, at last count, 157. The other thing that compounded it was that the lease adjoined another company's lease, Anglo-American, who had stopped mining there 50 years ago. The trouble is there'd been a lightning strike, and it's coal and it's compressed underground, and so it just caught fire and it was burning out of control, and it had been burning for 40 years. And there's nothing you can do about it because it's underground, it's very compressed, and it's just that smoulder. But it was gradually making its way towards the company's lease. So we got illegal settlers, holes opening up, houses dropping, and a fire that you can't put out. And I sort of knew in that moment, you know what? The rules no longer apply. One thing I had to do, be flexible, because you had to approach this from a completely different set of perspectives. You had to be absolutely lateral in your thinking. There was no one-size-fits-all approach. I had to call the company, as I did right on the spot, called the headquarters back in Melbourne and just said, whatever you're thinking, stop, because it's not going to work. This is going to go on for decades. We can't solve this overnight, and we're going to have a lot more people here and a lot more effort and a lot more money, and that's what you're approaching. So fast forward now. I come to South Australia, I come to take on this role, and of course what I find is, from a corporate perspective, and I'm unashamedly corporate about that, from a corporate perspective, I find the South Australian public sector about 100,000 people, a revenue stream of about 17 billion a year, a captured market effectively of about over 1.5 million people that are our potential customers. So from a corporate sense, this is a pretty decent sized entity. This is a big player. Anywhere in the world, this would be a big player. And so the question the Premier asked me when I first got here is, can we do things differently? Is there scope for reform? Can we change? Can we lift our performance? How do we deal with people? And he wanted us to focus straight away on DPC. It's his own central agency, and sort of, make the changes there. And I guess that's what we have attempted to do. So if I go like... Oh, this one?
Yeah, arrows.
Arrows. Okay. So I guess what I do is, when I come to any project or any business or whatever I've had to do over the years, the first thing I want to do is define what I refer to as the operating model. So if you're there are things that, for the sake of the title, working outside the square, there are things that are inside the square and there are things that are definitely outside the square. If you're looking at reform type processes, small R reform, that's definitely inside the square. Those are the things that you can tinker with, you can change easily by yourself or with your groups. You can undertake a lot of things. But if you're looking at big R reform, you tend to be outside the square. This is where you're suggesting to people that what is needed is a paradigm shift. Sometimes seismic shifts, quite a lot of disruption, quite a lot of change, quite a lot of challenging of the orthodoxy. All the conventions, the processes have to be reviewed and challenged at every level, not just at a senior management level, but all the way through the business. And ultimately, the only way you're ever going to achieve successful change at that level is you've actually got to get a lot of people involved at every level. So I encourage my senior management team to make sure that they're very clear with their teams what their expectations are and what we're trying to do, and they need to articulate that. So as I say here, to articulate your values first and the mission that you're on. And then the hardest thing, I think, is defining it. And I always like to talk about, simplicity and effectiveness and accountability. But gee, when you ask somebody who's been doing a process a particular way for a long time, can you simplify it? It's actually quite a challenge. People find simplification difficult. Now, you will have all spent a lot of time at various parts of the organisations in government. You'll all work with various processes, and I'm sure, like me, in the 6 or 7 months I've been here, you've run into processes that are very complex, that are maybe unnecessarily so. But the thought of trying to change them is also a challenge. Now, last week I was out on the Eyre Peninsula on the Upper Spencer Gulf, and I spent time in a lot of the Service SA outlets. And we're trying to move more transactions online. Go digital by default. It's quicker, it's more cost effective, it's an easier experience for a lot of people, not for everyone, but for a lot of people. Part of that process is to set up a self-help terminal in each of the Service SA areas and to gradually get people to come in, and rather than wait in queues, if that's free, you can go and tap in and do stuff yourself. I spoke to each of the managers independently in these 3 different outlets, and I said, how's that going? They said, it's good, but there are some things that we do that you could never, that are too complicated and you'll never be able to put online. And I found that really challenging, that we've developed in places processes that, for whatever reasons over time, have just become very complex. And the thought that you can't, in a digital age, take a complex issue and simplify it online, to me is a sort of, just doesn't make sense to me. The digital world is where the whole world's running at a rate of knots. And the public sector has to move there, and has. There's some pockets of excellence in the public sector, but there are other areas where we've just got to simplify things. So the challenge is identifying those areas where you really think you could do better, where we could simplify, and really challenging it and having a go at how you can do that. Now, I don't know all these things. I know the broad concepts. I rely heavily on the people who work with me and for me to come up with their own ideas and to put forward the concepts, and then we can do that. So to do it, you need a strategy. You have to have a plan. A lot of us, we sit around in rooms, big meetings, everybody comes up with a strategy, got a cup of coffee in the hand, we've got an hour on our schedule, and we talk about things, and then we reconvene again next week, and then next week. A lot of strategies. Strategy is the easy part. Getting the plan down from that strategy is a bit more complex, but by far the hardest thing to do is the implementation. You know, that's the actual do bit. You know, you stop talking, you stop writing, you actually got to get up off your backside and go and do stuff. And that's the hard bit, it's the longest, it's the thing that demands the most of people. The Premier is particularly interested in implementation. As he said recently, you know, we've got to stop with the ideas sometimes because we've got a lot of ideas. I want to actually see how they're implemented. I want to see some things actually happening. And so, you know, that's the real challenge for us all, is to understand what our strategy and plan is, but also how we implement, how we're going to go about delivering on that. So one of the ways that we do it is to optimise our systems and our operations, and really to look at our own capabilities. It's too easy, I think, for incoming people like myself to say, solution number one, fix the budget, sack a lot of people. That's too easy. That's a conventional sort of way of doing it. Now, some of that has to happen for various reasons. But at the end of the day, I think you really need to do a much more detailed analysis of the people who work for you. What are their capabilities? Are they actually in the right job? You know, there are lots of capable people who, for various reasons, have found themselves directed down a pathway. They're doing incredible work, but they would be turbocharged if they had the right sort of job and environment. And so, you know, the way we go about doing it, we're trying to go about doing that, is through the use of a lot of data. So we collect a lot of data now, and we're trying to do some deep analytics so that we use that to underpin our decision making, which brings us to evidence-based decision making. And that's what we want. We want evidence. You know, we've all got our gut feel, we've all got our intuition, and we've all got our experiences. And all of those things are valid. But there is no substitute for hard evidence, and hard evidence needs to be sought, and it needs to be measured, and we need to go and analyse it, and it needs to be consistent, and you need to develop it over time, and it needs to be shared. You have to share the data. You have to you have to integrate data sets. So that's a real challenge. And as I said, all actions are measured and verified and benchmarked, and then sitting right at the bottom of all this, but effectively it runs through everything we do, is having a very strict approach to budget discipline. I have a simple mantra with my guys. I just say, remember, you can't spend what you don't have. Do not spend what you don't have. Now that is a challenge in government. I often say it's because it's not your money. People are a little bit more flexible with how they achieve targets. And we see cost overruns all over the place. Best of intentions, going to meet this target by this time, targets missed, we need more money to implement. This year's, in March, I think, when I was here doing the first budget bilaterals, I said to the Treasurer, you know, A, we'll meet your targets. I don't know how many just got here, but I'll give you a guarantee we'll meet your savings targets, and we're not asking for another dollar. There was nothing. I said, I've got plenty of people, I've got plenty of dough, you know, just got to do it differently. And so we didn't have any budget bits. And we found the $7 million in 2 weeks that they were looking for. And we put the budget back into the black, and we've identified $21 million of savings for the next financial year. It's there, it can be done. It's not done without hardship and pain, but you know, these are difficult fiscal times. We're in a bit of a trough, and we need to put the shoulder to the wheel and do it. So if everybody's feeling comfortable about how they're running their budget, I suggest that you need to think again, because you should be feeling a little bit uncomfortable about that. And part of my job as a CE in this kind of environment is, unfortunately, at times I've got to be deliberately unreasonable, because it's only by doing that can you sometimes force change, until people get their own level of awareness and say, hang on, I know more about this than you do. I'll show you how we can make this a lot better and we can change it. And then that's a great breakthrough moment. I'll try that again. Here we go. So I sort of take a pretty simple approach. I like to keep things really simple. You know, it's too many words, it's too many people interpret them in different ways. So I go back to the very simple things. So I look at my design principles when I'm thinking about the workplace I'm in. So I like it to be flexible, highly flexible. I like people to be mobile. I like the workplace spaces to be mobile. And I really think, you know, we have to move more and more into a technology-based environment. Now, I live on level 16 over in the State Admin Centre, and that is none of those dot points apply. None. Absolutely none. You know, I've got people who walked onto that floor and they can't get access to Wi-Fi. I spent a month trying to get a computer to work when I first got here. It was a series of closed offices with blinds down and doors closed and nobody talking to one another. You know, so it was everything that I disliked about a work environment. And people, you know, had these very set times and set processes, and I just thought, wow, this is dinosaur stuff. You know, we've got to change the way we do things. So we're gutting that floor now. It's going to be completely open space. There will be no offices. When I go back up there in October, you know, I'll sit out where everybody else sits. And I'm doing that temporarily on level 12, where we've taken down all the screens and everything. We've got everybody sit out in the open space, and it works really well. You get to know people, you get to see things, you get cross-collaboration happening naturally. You know, people start to go, oh, that person does such and such down there, I'll go talk to them about it right now, solve that problem right now. You know, stuff moves through much quicker. Productivity's increased just by going open plan. And then we want to roll out a series of this right across all of the various places that we operate in DPC over the next couple of years. And what you get is, you know, you spend $400,000 or $500,000 doing a complete refit to a floor. But what you get is a consolidation of people. So on level 16, we'll move from about 40 to about 80. And there's plenty of space once you take the offices down. What that enables us to do is we can sublet other floors. And we get ongoing savings. I've got 3 floors I'm going to sublet. That's about $1.3 million a year ongoing, over $5 million across the forward estimates, just by doing that one change. And people's lives will improve because of it. So it's important to do that. So we will have mobile workspaces. It will become a lot more flexible. My view is that I don't care where people work. I don't care when they work. All I care is about the outcomes. You know, if they've got a target and they want to deliver on something, let's do that. And how they do it is up to them. And how flexible they want to be, as flexible as they want to be. Anne mentioned it, it's about trust. You've got to put trust in your people. You know, you're all professionals, you all know what you're doing. I figure, okay, I'll start on the basis of trust with people. So let them make the call, let them make the decision about it, as long as I get to see that end piece, that end result at the agreed time. If we can do that, we're doing well. So I won't go through everything there, but it tells you, it sort of indicates the sorts of things that we're trying to do, you know, all the way down to a paperless office. I love paperless offices. And very quickly, so when I talk about what's happened outside the square, these are some of the things we're doing. I just must make mention of this in relation to pay, the accounts payable stuff. This week you would have seen some media coverage, both on television and other places, about delays in payment by parts of government, and, you know, it's outrageous, it's a scandal. Yeah, well, maybe. We can always do better. But I always say the best way to understand how you run systems anywhere is to benchmark yourself. Go and find out where you actually stand in relation to things. So let's look at accounts payable here in DPC, which runs it for whole of government. It reaches a 93% payment within 30 days' time. So it's got some room for improvement. That's true. Where does 93% sit? Well, let's compare ourselves with other state governments around the place. There's no point doing that because we're way above every other state government. So who can we compare ourselves with? How about the Commonwealth? Doesn't rate at all. Let's take every major corporation of a similar size globally. No, they're not in the ballpark. Why is that? Because there's a single international benchmark on that. Oh, that'd be us. That's this place. This place is the world leader. This is the benchmark. And what that tells me is we've got scope to do a lot more. We can do a lot more stuff. We've got people who know how to do stuff, who know how to work at the best that they can possibly be. Now, if they want to do it, how they do it is up to them. Be as flexible as you want, you know, chop and change, challenge the orthodoxy, get rid of unnecessary processes, as long as you're focused on how you can improve performance and deliver on what you need to deliver. And I think for me, those are the key messages and the key focus that I'd like to leave with you today. Thanks very much.